An old man's wheelchair jammed in the street. Dozens passed by, but not one stopped. Until a man knelt to fix it, then stood tall, saluting. Why? Because he wasn't just anyone. And the stranger wasn't just a passerby. San Antonio, Texas. June's sun hung high like a blazing furnace, scorching every inch of concrete. At the intersection of Houston and Navarro, traffic crawled in a midday haze. Horns blipped. Engines idled. People grumbled, checking their watches, rushing to wherever they had to be, but not everyone moved. Right there, stuck in the middle of a pedestrian crossing, was an electric wheelchair. Motionless. One wheel jammed deep in a cracked groove in the pavement. The man in the chair, gray-haired. Mid-70s, leaned forward, trying to rock it loose. His hands trembled. His shoulders strained. Sweat streamed down his brow. Still, he didn't call out, didn't wave for help, just kept trying. Quietly, with the kind of patience you only earn after surviving things far worse than traffic. People saw him. A woman with a stroller glanced and looked away. A man in sunglasses walked past without a word. Drivers waited, then began honking. A pickup swerved dangerously close, horn screaming. Someone shouted from a car window, "If you can't move, stay off the road." Laughter followed, angry, impatient, cruel. The old man didn't answer. He simply bowed his head, not in defeat, but like someone refusing to lose the last piece of dignity he had left. The sun glinted off his forearm where his rolled-up sleeve revealed a faded tattoo, curved along the skin like a whisper from the past. It read, "Semper Fi," but no one noticed, at least not until a door opened. 2 cars back, a gray-black SUV had stopped. From it stepped a man mid-30s, white shirt, jeans, worn combat boots. He stood still for a second, then walked, calmly, purposefully. While the city blared around him, he knelt beside the old man. No words, just action. He reached under the chair, gripped the locked wheel, and twisted. A soft grind, and it came free. The chair shifted. The man in it breathed out, eyes lifted in quiet thanks, but the younger man's gaze had locked onto something else, the tattoo. He froze. Then, slowly, he stood tall, taller than before, and before dozens of watching strangers at that choked intersection. He raised his hand and saluted, not flamboyantly, not theatrically, just a single, solemn motion, a Marine's salute. The horns fell silent. Conversation stopped mid-word. Even the breeze seemed to hold still, because only those who've worn the uniform understood what that salute meant. The old man's name was Raymond Burke, 78 years old. Once a first sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, 3 decades earlier, he led a platoon through the burning streets of Fallujah and the dust-choked alleys of Ramadi. A landmine stole his ability to walk, but not his will. Since then, he'd lived a quiet life on the eastern edge of San Antonio. A modest home, a modest routine. Each morning, he rolled to the corner store. Sometimes, he stopped at the park near the bus stop just to read, or to listen, or to feel the breeze on his face. He didn't tell stories, not unless you asked. And even then, they came out slow, like embers from a long-dosed fire. But if you ever heard him say the words Semper Fi, you'd see something in his eyes, a flicker, like a memory passing through. The man who fixed his chair at the intersection was Kyle Reeves, Major, United States Marine Corps, stationed just 15 minutes away at Lackland. He hadn't said a word after the salute, no name, no questions, no need, just a look, long and silent. The kind of look that reached back in time, because nearly 20 years ago, Kyle had been a recruit. And the man who trained him, the one who barked orders, who taught him discipline, who pulled him from the edge when he wanted to quit, was a First Sergeant Raymond Burke. Back then, Raymond was a storm in uniform. His voice shook the gravel. His eyes could freeze you in place. And Kyle, 19, green, barely holding it together, wanted to run. But Raymond never let him. He taught him to stand tall, to breathe through fear, to march into the fire with purpose. And now, 19 years later, here they were again. Not on a battlefield, not on a base, but on a broken crosswalk, under a blistering Texas sun, surrounded by horns and strangers, and yet they knew each other. Not my face, but by a tattoo, a memory, a bond, and by a salute that said everything words never could. A salute that spoke of fur and discipline, and days survived when others didn't. A salute that said, I remember you, and I never forgot. Not everyone understood it right away. A few cars behind kept honking. Someone shouted, What's the holdup? It's just an old guy in a wheelchair. But Kyle didn't move. He held his salute, eyes locked on the faded tattoo that time hadn't erased. And then the sidewalk began to shift. A woman paused, lifting her hand to shield her eyes from the sun. A delivery worker froze, straps in hand, his gaze fixed on the two men. Something about the scene didn't feel like traffic anymore. It felt sacred. Raymond tilted his head, looking up at the man before him. Then, for the first time since his wheelchair had jammed, he spoke. Major Reeves, your back's slouching. Kyle blinked, startled. A soft breath of disbelief escaped his throat, and then he laughed, just a little. The kind of laugh that carries 19 years of memory in one breath. Sir, First Sergeant, I never thought I'd see you like this. Raymond didn't flinch. Battlefields change, he said, voice slow and steady. Honor doesn't. Kyle nodded, then knelt again. He adjusted the wheelchair's rim, just to be sure, then gently guided it back toward the sidewalk. The crowd watched without a word. A man removed his cap. A woman placed her hand over her heart. A teenager who'd been filming slowly lowered his phone. And at the far end of the street, the traffic light turned green, then red, then green again. But here, on a sun-beaten crosswalk in San Antonio, time stood still, long enough for people to realize they hadn't just witnessed a moment, they'd witnessed a man. Kyle stood beside Raymond, one young, one old, one standing, one seated. But in that moment, neither stood taller. Only one thing filled the air: respect. Then Kyle leaned down and asked quietly, You still make recruits drop for push-ups when they talk back? Raymond's lips curled into a grin. If I had my legs, you'd be doing 50 right now. And this time, they both laughed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't long, but in the middle of a blistering Texas noon, surrounded by honking cars and people who'd just fallen silent, it sounded like peace. No slogans, no speeches, just one man who stopped, one man saluted, and an entire street, bowing in turn. It could have ended there, just a quiet moment on a noisy street, a forgotten crosswalk, a silent salute between two Marines. But stories like these have a way of traveling farther than anyone expects. That evening, someone who had passed by posted a short video online, just 40 seconds long. No commentary, no edits, only the distant hum of traffic, a fading horn, and two men, one standing, one seated frozen in a salute that stopped time. By morning, the video was everywhere. It graced the front page of the San Antonio Express News with a headline that simply read, A salute and a city bows. Local TV stations picked it up. Radio hosts talked about it. Reporters called Kyle's unit to verify the story. They didn't share Raymond's name. But some veterans in the area recognized him, not my face, but by the stillness in his posture, the tattoo on his arm, the silence in his eyes. The next day, outside the old brick house where Raymond lived, someone left a bouquet of flowers, a neatly folded flag, and a handwritten note taped gently to the gate. It read, "To First Sergeant Burke. We owe you a salute." Raymond found them just after sunrise. He didn't say a word. He just sat for a long time, let his fingers run along the flag's crease, then looked out toward the horizon and breathed a little deeper. Kyle declined interviews, no press, no headlines, but at a private meeting on base, he spoke just one sentence. He never asked to be remembered, just not to be erased. By noon, the city installed a sign at the crossing on Houston and Navarro, the very spot where it all began. It was small, easy to miss if you weren't looking. But if you paused to read it, you'd see just one line. Pause, salute, and remember why you walk free. Days passed before Raymond was seen outside again. Not for the cameras, not for the praise, just his usual morning ritual. He wheeled himself to the park near the bus stop, stopped beneath the wide oak tree, and sat in its shade, watching the city begin its day. But this time, he wasn't alone. A small group of local veterans had gathered around him. Some had gray hair, and some had stiff knees, all with the look of men who had walked long roads. They didn't say much. One handed him a cup of coffee, another gave him a handshake, a glance, a nod. They hadn't been invited. They didn't need to be. They came, because that's what you do when one of your own is seen again. Then a woman approached, holding a photo old, laminated, edges worn soft. It showed 3 young men in uniform standing in a jungle half a world away. She bowed her head, voice steady but thick with memory. "My father served under you," she said. "You saved his life in Southeast Asia. 1969. He passed 2 years ago, but he always talked about a first sergeant named Raymond Burke." Raymond took the photo gently, studied it. His eyes, though aged, still caught the one soldier standing at the back, quiet but never quitting. "He was one of the best I ever led," he said, barely above a whisper. The woman wept, not out of sorrow, but because, for the first time, her father's story wasn't just a fading memory. It had a witness, and that witness was still here. Later that afternoon, Kyle came by, no press, no escort, just one Marine, visiting the man who once made him one. They sat on the porch together. The old wood creaked beneath their chairs. The wind stirred the faded flag above the doorway. Words weren't necessary. Kyle reached into his jacket and handed over a small envelope. Inside was a copy of Raymond's long-lost commendation, a document misplaced more than 20 years ago. "We found it," Kyle said quietly. "It won't rewrite the past, but it belongs to you." Raymond unfolded the paper, read it silently. Then, he tucked it into his jacket pocket, right next to his wallet. "I don't need commendation," he murmured. "I just need to know the men I guided now guide others." Kyle didn't answer, but in his heart, that sentence was a medal, a piece of history returned. It's not cast in bronze, but etched in memory and gratitude.